You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do. Hello, people-centric leaders. Thanks for joining us again this week for our leadership development topic. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about when managers overshare. Last podcast, we talked about transparency and open communication in workplaces. And so at the end of that, Matt kind of brought up a situation of when managers bring their employees too far or bring them in too much and what that looks like and what you do. And both Bethany and I said, whoa, that's a whole other podcast. So here it is, because it is a whole other podcast. We were talking before this, and when I was working retail, when I was very young, 18, 19, 20, I had a manager that did this to me, and she kept pulling me in her office and explaining all of the things that she wanted or that we needed to do coming down from the corporate office. She was very stressed about it. She felt like she couldn't implement and do all of these things and still do the job that she had. So then me being the achiever, I'm going to call it achiever. It sounds less terrible than authoritarian. Me being the achiever that I am, I went out on the floor at 19 and told all of these people working there what we were going to do and how we were going to change things and what we were going to fix in that day. Granted, I also only worked about 30 hours a week. I was not a full-time employee. I was a part-time person. I was just there during college. And so I had no authority. I looked 12, I was very young looking. And I had all of these people looking at me just being like, who are you? And why are you telling us what to do? So over time, I did get some things done, right? Because I did them myself. No one else wanted to do that. And no one else wanted to be like, oh, sure, we'll jump right in. So I did get some stuff done. But then I realized that I was creating conflict on my team, and it was causing people to not really enjoy working with me and not want to be around me. So I stopped working on the things the boss drew me in on. So once I stopped that, then the boss was like, what's going on with you? And I was like, I can't win here. Please help me. And it was one of those early moments of what is right here. So I think today we're going to talk about those situations and what managers should be doing, the fine line of transparency. We're going to talk about if that's happening to you, what you can do. So today I have with us Philip Herzog. Hi, Philip. How are you today?
Great. Doing great.
Yeah.
It's a great morning here in Springfield.
Yeah.
We talked about how hot it is and how high the dew point is and how high humidity is and the science that we don't really understand what all those things mean. We just know it's hot, but it's still a great morning.
They use the term oppressively hot when discussing some of the dew point stuff there. So oppressively hot.
It's oppressively hot. So
Yeah.
we're fighting the oppressive heat here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So welcome, Philip. Thanks for joining us. And we also have Bethany Taft. Bethany, how are you today?
Good. I stayed home to avoid the oppressive heat today.
Smart. Stay in the air conditioning.
Yeah. So we're getting really close to my due date, and there's a lot of heat. And so I just want to not go anywhere right now.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Yeah. So I set us up. I think we should start with the fine line there, right? And we should probably start talking about the manager first, because I think that's where the biggest impact is if a manager could avoid doing this, but also how do we maintain transparency? So what are some of your thoughts on this topic, starting with the managers?
Well, I'm being at managers. I mean, I feel like I always try to empathize with the manager because their job is really hard. They're trying to navigate like what's coming down from the top to them, and then also how to lead the people who report to them. And so it is a challenge sometimes, especially if you're in a larger organization, and there's a lot of voices, or you have a lot of people reporting to you, or things like that. But it can happen anywhere. And I've had a similar situation as Diana. I think we handled it differently, probably. I'm not saying one was better or worse. But I think
I
it's
can
just,
almost guarantee that you handled it better. It's 99%
well,
sure
I
that
was
you did.
older than you
Oh,
when
okay.
mine happened, so that maybe was
Maybe
helpful,
that's,
maybe a
yeah.
little bit helpful. But it's super challenging as the employee. But so for the manager, you can understand like why. I think I understand why this happens, especially if you don't feel like you have the support that you need within your position, or you're just feeling isolated, or like you don't feel like you have the support. And if there's somebody that you are like, oh, this person seems trustworthy, I can sort of latch on to them and kind of share where my struggles are at. And that seems fine, right? But there's lots of problems with that, and it puts your employees in really weird situations, because they don't really know what to do with that information of like, should I help right now? Should I just listen? Is this my job? I don't know what I don't know what my boss wants from me right now. And so I think if you're in that management role, yeah, it's not that you can't talk about the issues that you're facing. It's probably just not wise to, oh, this is creepy. You guys can't see this, but Philip behind him, Matt, just showed up, and it was weird. Anyways,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
Like
talk to my manager about that. He
creepily
is
looked over his shoulder. Yeah.
so we're gonna have to talk about that. Anyways, I think it's okay to know that, like, yes, you can talk about those hard things, but your employees are probably not the best people to talk about those things with. So where should we channel that? What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I've said something about my thoughts on when it's gossip and when it's appropriate to share and those sorts of things. And so I always say things like, if you're complaining down in the org chart, right, there's a hierarchy. If you're complaining to the people that report to you, that's probably bad. If you're complaining up, there might be a solution to do that. So I think it's how you approach it, right? Like in my situation, my boss very much was complaining to me. Like, corporate wants me to do this. She wants me to do this. They want me to do this. I still have a store to run, right? Like, very much complaining to me. And so, like I said, I wanted to fix it. But I think had she pulled the team together and said, here are the issues we are facing, here are the things we have to do. How can we do those together? That's a totally different approach. And so, yeah, Philip, what were you
I
going to
was
say?
curious, Diana, when you and it might be a lot to remember, but kind of at the start, did you think when your boss, I imagine, the first time started complaining just to complain, and she's like, finally, there's a competent person here. Her name is Diana Royalty. She's intense and tiny. Like I
Said
can
at the
complain to her
time,
in safety, But
she
then,
called me Hollywood. That was her
yeah,
name for me. I still don't fully understand it.
oh
But
my
she was
gosh.
like, come to my office.
Hollywood. So she starts complaining to Hollywood, and then Hollywood goes and fixes. Like I think at one point there, she probably was complaining to complain anyway. You probably weren't the first person she complained to, but you might have been one of the first or the best at then having a complaint and being like, "Oh, I can go fix this," which in my mind, then that's like the perfect cycle, right? She doesn't have to handle the things, which in that case, it sounds like she was complaining about things that you both could influence like locally. So corporate wants this terrible change to happen. All these people who don't do work, I have to get them to work somehow. I don't like to do that. I can't do that. I'm afraid to do it. Whatever the reason. And then she sent you to go do it. And so it kind of builds this cycle where you, without having more role and responsibility, officially start doing more work and having more stress almost, right? Like this management stress. And she I don't know. It's some kind of like it's like a dynamic relationship. But when did you kind of ever notice if when you started going and fixing, did the complaining increase, or was it kind of the same throughout your time there?
Man, I can't totally remember. I remember feeling more and more stressed out about it. I don't remember if it increased, but I remember myself feeling more and more stressed out about it as time went
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Kind of like you had to own the complaints more because you could do something about them as
Yeah,
opposed to
and
letting them feel things.
I felt responsible, right? She was
Yeah, yeah.
trusting me or leaning on me. I don't totally know the motivation there now looking back, but something in me felt like she was trusting me to go do something, or she was leaning on me to be a competent employee in some way. And I
Mm.
felt more and more invested as that time went on.
It also, but it sounds like it was very rarely as clear as like, "Hey, can you help me with this and go do something?" It's like complaint, secret hidden code, right? Like unspoken message, and then you knew what
Yeah.
your marching orders were to then go do. And I think
Yeah.
that's a part of where it gets really messy also. Yeah, but yeah, you're like, because it feels bad for you either way. And then did she ever thank you, or like was there any feedback even on the backside of like, "Hey, wow, that was great. Corporate is happy."
I don't believe so. No, I don't. I think that was also a source of anxiety of like, oh, I don't know if what I'm doing is working. I don't know if this is good. I know that I'm making people mad, but I don't know if this is good or not. Yeah,
Is
no,
it?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
but in
don't
the absence,
recall.
when you didn't do it, then she does notice, right? So it seems like there was a system in place. The machine that you have, you're getting the results from the machine that it's built to get. So I think she was like, "Whoa, whoa, buddy, you're Hollywood messing with my machine. Got to jump back in there and help this great thing we have going work out." So I think that's something that happens in a lot of workplaces too. If you hear complaints as like secret assignments almost, and I think it can come from a great place. Like, I want to help my team, I want to help my leader, they're really stressed, they have personal things going on too, like, this is a hard time, of course I can do a little extra and step in. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thought process. But to your point, I think it also though can lead to that, like, this secret cycle system that is not good for anyone and is just confusing for the team too.
No, I think I think the danger is that it can create toxicity. Another area of like where toxicity can sneak in, especially like if you as a manager are not in a great place within the organization, and your frustrations may be completely valid, by the way. But the problem is, like, if you are talking to your team about other leaders within the organization or the way things are being managed or things like that, and they're constantly hearing all of that stuff, you're just breeding this toxicity and this distrust and things like that, versus like having productive conversations about how to make changes within the organization. So there's like two ways to handle that, I think, as a manager. Is like, on one end, you have to be able to take that and say, okay, what can I do to lead my team better than how I feel like I'm being led, maybe? And what change can we impact as a team without having to go into all of the nitty gritty and maybe the messy stuff that's happening on the other side, and like channel that in a better way. Like you guys were talking about, like bringing the team together and saying, hey, here's some things that we need to do differently. I'd like us to work on this and make this better. And then on the other side, then being able to have the conversations that you need to have with the people above you to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need support, or help me get to a better place. And having those open and honest and transparent conversations. But the two can't, in some ways, you can't bleed those things together. And we were talking a little bit before of like, it's good to be vulnerable with your people as a leader. Like, that's really, really important. You've heard us, we've talked about that on other podcasts before. It's really good for people to understand and see you be a little bit vulnerable in your position, and say where you maybe need some help. But I think there's a line too that's just sort of like what's appropriate also to bring your team into. Again, we talk about how like parenting and like leadership are not that different in some ways, like management. There are certain things that like you might tell your kids, hey, mom's not having a good day today. And like, here's how I'm going to manage it. But I'm not going to go to my kids and tell them maybe all of the reasons why mom is having a bad day and then put it on them to fix. Do you know what I mean? And so it's really similar. It's just not an appropriate way to handle the situation. And so if you need support and you need help, go to the people above you. Or if you don't feel like you can get that, like go to somebody maybe outside of the organization that's trusted who can help you, whether that's a therapist or a consultant or a mentor or something like that, who can help you be guided through those conversations.
Yeah. And I'll also add that like when she was engaging me to fix these things, right? I got the idea that I was going to be promoted in the organization, right? It made it feel like I was working towards that thing, like the next step or the next promotion or a raise. It made it feel like she was testing me in some way. Like I'm testing to see if you could be the next assistant manager or whatever that looked like. I don't remember at the time. But it did feel like I am going to get this promotion next. But there were no discussions about that. There was no like, yes, I'm getting you on your management track. That none of that ever happened. So I do think that even doing that puts something on the employee. So it's dangerous if you have a manager as the manager don't have those positions and can't actually do that. Like
Weird power
in this person's mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if we said it when we were recording her before, but Philip was saying, yeah, it just is sort of, you are being asked to step into something, maybe, sort of being asked. It feels like you're being asked to do something that you actually don't have authority for as the employee. And so it's confusing for roles, not only for yourself as an employee, but for the rest of your team, because they're like, wait, we have the same job title, or we're at the same level or something like that. And so did something change? And that conversation never happened. So I do think that's different of like, hey, if you are trying to bring somebody up and trying to develop a person, again, no, there's boundaries with like what you share, but having an explicit conversation to say, hey, I really want to develop you into this next leadership role. Let me kind of bring you up under my wing a little bit and give you some opportunities to help support me or the team or the organization in a little bit of a different way. But that's not the situation here. And so maybe too, we could talk about then as the employee, like, how do you handle being in that situation? Because that's really sticky. Some people are like, I think Diana, you said it, and that's sort of how I felt too when I've been brought in. It's like, oh, it's nice that they trust me. Like they want to share this information with me because it feels like they trust me. And some people responses are probably like, ew, please don't involve me in any of that. I don't want to, like, please keep me out of your office. I want to be as far away from any of that as possible. So
Yeah, I think in my case it was both. In the beginning, I was like, yes, I feel trusted. I feel valued. I feel worthy. I feel confident. Like you want me to go do this stuff. And by the end, I was like, please don't call me in your office anymore. Like please leave me out of it. Yeah.
It gets to a point.
That's so interesting too, right? It's kind of like I imagine it's like a strong current, I was in Florida one time when the rip tides were just super strong. And you're like, I can kind of see it and I see the waves at the top, but then you get out there far enough and you felt it start to pull, you're like, whoa, I really have to paddle to get out of this. And it kind of sucks you in because it's a pattern and it's like set. And so one of my questions too, it's a little meta. So before we talk about the employees even, but for us, just the three of us, how do we know when either we're complaining or we're like in an area where complaining is happening in a way where it's not like it's solution oriented, and maybe not even venting? Because it can happen, like if a CEO does it, it's likely to happen to people that report to them. Like it just kind of is a trickle down too. I think that's one other reason why it's a toxic trait, because it kind of is like an acid that pours down the whole organization. Whatever the top leader is, whatever the highest level of leadership is that does this, it probably is going to trickle down to everyone below them too, which again kind of messes that org chart and just the structure. So for me, at least, I think usually complaining in my mind, it's when it's about things you clearly can't fix or can't control, right? Or something you can fix and control, and you just are choosing to not go into. And if there's a reason for it, great. But if it's like, it could be, oh, I can't go talk to them, right? Because that employee that I have Diana go and talk to is just so mean to me, and we had a conflict once, and it's never been the same, and it's really awkward now. And if that's like the motivation as to why you're not doing anything about it, it's like, well, then there is something that can be done, but that's work for you to do. I can't be the one to fix that, or complaint too. If you're like corporate, we had someone come to our house recently to do a quote for some work on our bathroom, and everything he said the whole time, corporate makes us do this, corporate makes us do that. And every time I asked a question, he said, well, corporate would say this, but this and that. And we said, whatever price we are given today, right? It's held for a year. That's what we were told. When we called, they were like, oh, corporate makes promises they can't keep. Corporate's terrible. And this was their sales guy. We didn't go with the company for like 12 reasons, but that was one of them.
Yeah.
Like he seems like he's fighting his own company. And
So
that just,
many red flags.
right. So many. So not a great look for us either as clients. Potential clients, never to be clients. So I think those are things that erode. And again, kind of when you're throwing other people under the bus always, I think that's a form of complaining. But what for you all are kind of your red or yellow flags for complaining and venting?
I was going to say that kind of is just the, like, if it's constantly everybody else and not me, or you know what I mean? Is like, or the person, if I hear somebody constantly pointing fingers to other people and they're never taking ownership over anything on their own, then I'm a little bit like, wait. Let's break this down a little bit. Or like, you can't do this because this person, like, you really can't. What about, what? Let's actually think through that. Or how is it always this person? How is it never, like, you don't have any responsibility here, really? And so I think that's one of the red flags that I see for sure, whether in myself or other people. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you said something about, it kind of spreads because it does. People are always watching other people. And if you're a leader in an organization or you're influential in an organization, people are watching you. And to say that you can't have a bad day is completely unreasonable. You can have a bad day. You can vent. You can be angry about things, but you just have to recognize when you're doing that and point it out. You have to be like, I don't know, I think about when Don has a bad day. Like, Don is a regular human. He has bad days. It's few and far between, but he does have bad days. And sometimes those bad days make the rest of us have a bad day. We feel yucky, we feel icky, there's like a negativity. Or sometimes we can go to him and be like, hey, are you having a bad day? What's happening here? And then he'll be like, yeah, I'm just feeling grumpy, or I got a flat tire on the way to work and it set my whole mood off, right? Like, you just have to recognize it a little bit and be self-aware enough to have those conversations with yourself and others. And that is not easy. That part is just not easy. So yeah, I guess I kind of trickled into emotional intelligence there, but there is a component of that when complaining. There's that moment of, is this complaining productive, or is this complaining just complaining because I feel better complaining? And those two things are very different. And you can do both. This is going to happen. But I think you have to recognize what you're complaining for, you know? Yeah. Does that answer your question, Philip, or did we get weird with it?
Oh, I love emotional intelligence. You can bring that up anytime. Well, as you're talking, it's easy to spread. I was like, oh my gosh, gossip and complaining, it's like margarine. Easy to spread. Not that good for you.
Not that good for you.
And the riptide one, that was a good one too. We didn't really like dig into that too much, but it's true. It's like sometimes you don't see it until you're sort of in the middle of it, and then you're like, oh crud, like now I'm too far out, and how do I get back? And you freak out, right? And that's not what you're supposed to do. Don't freak out.
Yeah, don't freak out. They say stay calm. But if leadership is a part of the riptide, then you're like, where's the lifeguard? We don't have any lifeguards. We're all angry and mad now. we're gonna just go into the ocean.
Yeah. But it does lead to the next part of this is like, if you're an employee, what do you do? Right? Like looking back, I would have done things very differently, but at the time I did not. But like,
Well, yeah.
yeah, like what would you, I think, looking back, I probably would have first asked the question of like, why are you telling me this?
Mhm.
It may be in a better way, maybe in a different way, but like, thanks so much for sharing. What can I do for you? Right? What's the point of this conversation? I'm here to just listen. If you need to just listen, that's fine. I'll listen and I'll walk away. If you need something from me, we need to talk about what that is and what those expectations look like,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, it's a challenging situation to be in. And I think it's good. I think it's good to ask the question of like that you were just asking, Diana. I think the way, and I don't remember all of it completely, but I think that I probably my go-to was just sort of at first just sort of empathizing and saying like, yeah, that sounds like, oh, like asking questions and sort of saying like that is a hard situation. I think that's okay to do as an employee, to just say like, yeah, knowing that sometimes people are not going to get it right and they maybe just have they're just frustrated in a situation, and you can say, okay, like I'm really sorry that that's going on. And also like it's okay to, I think, help direct your boss a little bit in this situation, to sort of just ask the questions of like, what conversations have you already had about this? Like, who have you talked to about this? Like if they're talking about their boss, oh, have you talked with them about that? That sounds like a really frustrating situation. Or and just helping ask them like what steps that they've already taken, so that you don't feel like you have to be the one that says, oh, let me try to fix this for you, or let me try to bear this burden or weight or whatever for you. But helping kind of direct them to it. But I think it's also, don't continue to invite it. I think especially if you are somebody who is a natural empathizer and you like that your boss is really like trusting of you and stuff, like it's probably not, if you're getting pulled into too much of just like organizational drama that you don't need to be involved in, don't keep asking about it. Don't follow up and say, hey, how's that going? Or hey, how did what happened with this? Or did you have this conversation? Or how did that meeting go? Or whatever. It's like, no, 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 just know like you don't need to follow up. That's not your position. And if you need to be brought into something else, then somebody will let you know. But I think it's okay to also, if your boss continues to bring those things up to you, for you to kind of set a boundary too. And I know that can be really awkward, but you can sort of say, hey, I feel bad that this is happening. I'm sorry that this is happening or that you're frustrated. I don't really think this is my role to help you through this situation. With just my current role right now, I just don't think that this is something that I'm supposed to step into. If that changes, like if if I need to be in a different role or whatever in the organization, or that happens, then like would love to talk about that. But I also want to make sure that I'm setting healthy boundaries here too. And so I think that's okay. Probably easier said than done, but I do think that that's very okay for you to know this is what my role is. I don't think I need to be brought into this conversation, and to just set that, and you can do it in a nice way.
I wish I would have figured out that conversation. Like this isn't really my role and I don't have the authority to go and change things right now. Like I'm willing to be influential. I'm willing to back whatever thing you want to go do. But at the end of the day, you have to set the expectation for the team. Because I do think by me exiting my lane, that's like a weird way to say it, but me not playing the role that I was meant to play and stepping outside of that role, it caused a lot of disharmony on the team. It caused a lot of stress for me. It caused a lot of people to resent what I was doing and not want to join and be a team. And so I think that like know your role, stay in your lane is super important in this situation. And like you were saying, if that changes, great. But yeah, I wish I could have had that conversation or known to have that conversation.
What do you
It's weird.
Oh, go ahead, Philip.
Oh no, it's Wi-Fi meetings. We love these. The timing. I was thinking too, Dan. I think part of why it's so strange when you consume an extra lane, especially in that situation, it's like an endorsed or blessed mutiny by leadership, right? Like, I am. You're not. It's not structured, but I, as the authority figure, will make it kind of structured. But at the same time, you receive no additional, like benefits or clear path forwards, or actually coaching or insight, which is so much of this too, right? I think a team that doesn't have good feedback and then also complaining, that's just so sad. That's just going to lead down like a hard way. But Bethany, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to ask the question of what do you guys think though about uh, if or when it's appropriate to say, gosh, I see issues here and I need to take it to the person that's above my boss. Like, do you guys ever think that that's appropriate?
Oh man, that's sticky. I wanted to instantly be like, yeah. And then I also was like, but no.
I know. There's a lot.
That's hard. That's hard, right?
It is hard.
That's the juicy question. And I guess too, if there's like a set of people, if there were several Dianas together, right, in that situation where you're like, there seems to be a lot going on with this leader, right? And again, I might be making the story wider than it really is, but they're not necessarily leading well. We have these goals from our, hierarchy above, even that this person's not really meeting. They're kind of checking out and they're having us do all these things that we shouldn't do. We started hating each other, and then we paused long enough to be like, whoa, why is this happening? We're all in the wrong lane. Let's reevaluate. And ideally, it is always that first step of, have you talked to the person first? So if it's a situation where you have mentioned to your leader, not like 12 people in an office, but just you to them, are you okay? Like, I've noticed you've been really stressed in a lot of ways, blah, 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 and if there's still just not traction, there is an appropriate way and channel to go about that. Usually every organization is different, but like if you have genuine concerns for a person, for a team, then there should be avenues for you to go about that, depending on how you're set up and the structure. And in my mind, this may not be the right advice, but every time you onboard in an organization, you kind of have your point person, right? Before you go to a specific department. And usually that's HR. And their role is typically, right, to kind of help be a mediator in these kinds of things, or counsel. So I always know who your people are in an organization, whether it's this type of leadership issue or just other things too. Like, you do need that support. But I think being just a transparent human being is always the best step. Like, you don't need to secretly create a mutiny. Like, go to a person to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah,
that's a-
I love the like, have you had the conversation with the person that you are frustrated with? Have you had that conversation, right? I should have gone to my boss at some point and said, "Hey, what is really going on? What is happening? How can we do this together? I feel like this is causing a bunch of drama." Um, and have that conversation with them. And also, if other people were saying stuff like that to me, which I can't remember at the time, but if other people were like, oh my gosh, our boss, she just is not doing anything, she's not checking out, then I would have had to encourage them to go talk to that person, right? Like, you go talk to the boss also. If all of us are saying the same thing and all of us are seeing the same thing, it's important for us to share that with this person. But yeah, I definitely was not in tune enough to do that back then, for sure.
yeah.
And a tool, when you do that too, especially if it's on role clarity or responsibility, I think taking your actual do you have a job description that you can find? Because I think a lot of the time, if there's a situation like this, odds are high you're like, oh, there was a job description that I agreed to, but I haven't seen it ever since. So if you don't know where that is, have them help you find it and then go over it together, right? So like, hey, these are the things. So when the boss does say, hey, what's wrong with you, Diana? You're not helping me like you used to. You have this beautiful boundary conversation that Bethany brought up too. But then also, like, I would really like to know my role and responsibilities. If you need something different, let's talk about what that could look like. But currently, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I really want to honor what we've agreed to do together. And that's what this is. Something different, let's make that together. And that way too, it's like a tool beyond you, so it doesn't feel as personal either. And kind of goes back to the, why are we here? What do we do? Like, what's our agreement to begin with?
Yeah. So I think it's like, you guys set that up well, that I think there is, it's not that you would never go talk to your boss's boss, but that shouldn't be your first move. So, ask the questions, have the conversation first, try to set the boundaries, make sure take some of those steps. But yeah, if you've done those things and we're continuing to see problems, then maybe it is appropriate to say, I'm going to bring somebody else in so that I don't have to continue to manage my manager in this way. And just sort of leave it with them. And then that's where it's, I think, a little bit hard sometimes for employees is to say, okay, I'm going to let this leader know, and then I need to step away from it and hope that they will handle it. But that's kind of what I would recommend at that point too, is if you do go have that conversation, then leave it there and back away and trust that leader will take care of it.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that, like, I fully had the best intentions, right? I was passionate about what I was doing. I wanted to be a really good employee. I was also, at the time I was in college and I was passionate about organization and business, and that I wanted to take that route. So I saw this as an opportunity. When I got pulled into those issues, I was asking my dad, like, what he would do. He was a big district manager of a large retail shop for a long time. And so I was like, what would you do, Dad? What books can I read? What can I get into to help all of this thing? And, I think my dad said, you shouldn't be doing anything, but I just didn't listen to that, right? I was like, whatever, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about at the time. But and since I was reading all these business books, I was like, I got this. And my dad did give me advice about what would happen in his shop if that's what it was. And so I think it's really hard to differentiate in those moments of, yes, you have good intent. Yes, you want to fix it. Yes, you want to be a good leader, but also this is not your job yet. This is not what you should be doing. And this is not what you should have to handle right now. So I think those moments that's hard to recognize when you're in those moments. Yeah. So, yeah. What else should we talk about? What have we not covered?
I feel like we've gotten it. Yeah, we've talked about, like, how does this happen for managers? Why is this an issue? What can you do differently? And then as an employee, like, how do you have these challenging conversations and what steps can you take? So I feel like we've covered a lot, but I think, again, this can be really situational. And so if you are in this position, whether the manager or the employee, reach out. If you need support on this, if you want to talk with us more, we would love to help just kind of navigate some of those conversations with you and point you in the right direction. Either way, whatever side you're on there.
Yeah. So listen to the outro to hear how to contact us, but we will always take a call. We'll always take an email. Yeah. If that's it, we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well.